Have you ever wondered if a story written 400 years ago in England could actually be the story of your own neighborhood, your own city, or even your own heart?
चुचपा हो गया हमारे साथ। चुचपा जानते हैं आप लोग?
It sounds like a stretch until you see the world through the lens of Vishal Bhardwaj. We often talk about film adaptations as mere translations, taking text from a book and putting it on a screen. But what Bharadwaj achieved with his Shakespeare trilogy was something far more visceral. He didn't just change the names and the locations, he found the precise cultural frequency in India where Shakespeare's themes of power, jealousy, and revenge could resonate with a deafening roar. He took Macbeth and turned it into Maqbool. He took Othello and turned it into Omkara. And he took Hamlet and turned it into Haider. But the big question is, how does Vishal Bhardwaj take a camera and turn a dusty village or a crowded city into a stage for these epic tragedies? Today we are going to deconstruct the filmmaking language of Vishal Bhardwaj and see how a director uses shadows, soundscapes and the very geography of India to breathe new life into the bard.
एक बार एक आदमी की शादी हुई,
फिर
खत्म।
But before we look at the individual movies, we have to understand the DNA of a Vishal Bhardwaj film. What makes his Shakespeare different from a Hollywood version? First, you have to understand that Bharadwaj doesn't view Shakespeare as literature. He views him as a chronicle of the raw, unfiltered human ego. Before a single frame is shot, Bharadwaj identifies the universal truth at the center of the play and then hunts for its Indian equivalent. This is the secret sauce of his pre-production process. He asks himself, where in modern India does the absolute power of a king still exist? In Maqbool, he found it in the Mumbai underworld, where a don is a king and the word is law.
मैं पान नहीं खाता।
Where does the toxic sting of jealousy and caste-based pride still burn? In Omkara, he found it in the political badlands of western Uttar Pradesh.
अब जो जानते हो, बस वही जानो। मेरे सच और मेरे झूठ में मैं अब कोई फर्क नहीं आएगा।
And where does the existential crisis of a son seeking the truth about his father's death feel most urgent? In Haider, he found it in a political and emotional turmoil of the Kashmir valley.
जी मर गए। He's dead. हैं? हाँ? सच कह रहा हूँ, डेड बॉडी भी ढूंढ ली है मैंने। अब आप दोनों को छुप-छुप कर डिवाइड करने की जरूरत ही नहीं है।
And this leads us to the next major theme, the power of the land, what we call Mitti. In the original plays, the setting is usually a cold castle or a royal kingdom. But Bharadwaj makes a location a living, breathing character, whether it's the rain-soaked streets of Mumbai, the burning fields of Uttar Pradesh, or the frozen silence of Kashmir. The environment dictates how the characters behave. He uses the land to tell the story of the people living on it, making the foreign stories feel completely Indian. But beyond the geography, there is the theme of the flaw. Every Shakespearean hero has one, and Bharadwaj uses his camera to obsess over these flaws. In Maqbool, the camera lingers on the sweat and the nervous glances, capturing the creeping rot of ambition. In Omkara, the cinematography focuses on the eyes, the wide-eyed monster of jealousy, that show the moment a seed of doubt is planted. In Haider, the filmmaking is about the gaze, who is watching whom, and what is hidden in the shadows of a state under surveillance. And speaking of shadows, one of the most fascinating things about Shakespeare is the ghosts and magic. But how do you do that in a modern Indian setting without it looking like a B-grade horror movie? Look at the witches in Maqbool. In the play, they have a cauldron and fly. In the movie, Pandit and Purohit are two middle-aged men eating snacks while they look at a horoscope. They use a drawing of a circle on a dusty table to explain how the balance of power works in Mumbai. That circle is their magic. It's terrifying because it feels so real.
6 महीने में अब्बा जी की गद्दी मियाँ की है। King of King.
Another example is the ghost of the father in Haider. Instead of a floating spirit, we see Rudar, played by Irfan Khan. He enters through the fog, wearing a heavy coat and sunglasses.
आप डॉक्टर है क्या?
मैं डॉक्टर की रूह हूँ।
Another major theme is his use of music as a language. Because Vishal Bhardwaj is a music director himself, the songs in his films are never just for entertainment. They are like dialogues that the characters are too afraid to say out loud. He uses rhythm and melody to match the movie's heartbeat. Take the song Bidi Jalaile. Most people see it as a dance number, but look at the filmmaking. The song is set in a dark outdoor camp. The lighting comes from actual fires and torches. The rhythm of the drums matches the frantic energy of the plot, moving towards a boiling point. Compare that to Jhelum from Haider. The song is slow, haunting, and the camera moves across the river like a funeral procession. The music conveys the valley's grief before the actors even open their mouths. He uses folk instruments like the rabab and the dholak not just for sound but to give the film a texture. When the music gets loud and chaotic in the background, you know a character is about to lose their mind. And finally, there is a theme of powerful women. In Bharadwaj's world, the women are the most dangerous and most intelligent people in the room. They aren't just wives, they are the architects of the tragedy. Look at Nimmi in Maqbool. There is a scene where she is looking at herself in the mirror, cleaning blood that isn't there. The camera stays in a tight close-up on her eyes. You see her manipulation and her madness all at once. She is the one who pushes Maqbool to kill. Then there is Ghazala in Haider. She is the most complex character in the entire trilogy, with scenes that blur the lines between motherly love and something far more suffocating. She isn't just a mother, she is a woman trying to survive in a war zone by any means necessary. Vishal uses the camera to capture their silence, their glances, and their secrets, making them the true center of the tragedy. But to truly understand how Bharadwaj uses filmmaking to trap a character within his own conscience, you have to start with his first Shakespearean experiment, Maqbool, an adaptation of Macbeth in 2003. If you are not familiar with the story of Macbeth, it is essentially a descent into darkness. It follows a brave general who, spurred on by a prophecy and his wife's ruthless ambition, murders his king to take the throne. But the crown comes at a cost. The rest of the play is a haunting exploration of how the blood on their hands eventually stains their minds. In Maqbool, Bharadwaj takes this royal tragedy and places it in the lap of the Mumbai underworld. Here, the king is Abbaji, an aging but powerful don. Macbeth becomes Maqbool, his most trusted lieutenant, and Lady Macbeth becomes Nimmi, Abbaji's mistress, who is secretly in love with Maqbool and goads him into killing the only father figure he has ever known. The main theme here is the architecture of guilt. If you watch Maqbool again, notice how dark the whole movie is. Most of the scenes take place at night or in rooms where sunlight barely reaches. In filmmaking, this is called low-key lighting. Bharadwaj does this because the movie is about the darkness growing inside a human being. This tells the audience without a single word that this man is hiding a secret. He is becoming a monster. The camera work in Maqbool is very claustrophobic. The rooms feel small and the ceilings feel low. The camera is often looking through a half-open door or from behind a wall. It makes you feel like you are spying on something you shouldn't be seeing. This creates a feeling of guilt in the audience. You aren't just watching a movie, you are a witness to a crime. One of the most brilliant filmmaking choices in Maqbool is the use of reflections and glass. You will notice how often we see characters through windows, in mirrors, or reflected in car-polished surfaces. It's a visual metaphor for the dual lives these characters lead. Maqbool is a loyal soldier on the surface, but a murderer in the mirror. Nimmi is a traditional consort in public, but a conspirator in the shadows. By shooting through these layers, Bharadwaj forces us to look past the surface, making the audience feel like they are eavesdropping on a deadly secret. As we watch Maqbool's descent into madness, the filmmaking shifts. We are no longer watching a gangster movie, we are watching a psychological horror film. This transition from the organized power of the first act to the chaotic paranoia of the third is a blueprint for how Bharadwaj uses the camera to track the disintegration of a human soul. But if Maqbool was a film about the shadows of the soul and the cold, wet concrete of the city, Bharadwaj's next step was to take us somewhere where the sun is so bright it blinds you. He moved from the internal architecture of guilt to the external landscape of ego. In 2006, we got Omkara, based on Othello. If you aren't familiar with the story of Othello, it's a tragedy of manipulation. It follows a great general who is tricked by his trusted subordinate into believing his wife has been unfaithful. It is a study of how insecurity, when fed by a master manipulator, can turn the purest love into a murderous rage. In Omkara, the general becomes a political enforcer. The subordinate becomes the iconic Langda Tyagi, and the handkerchief that proves the betrayal becomes a jeweled waist belt. The theme here is the fire of jealousy. If Maqbool was about shadows, Omkara is about heat. The whole movie looks like it was dipped in the tea or dust. The colors are yellow, brown and burnt orange. As a viewer, you can almost feel the sun burning your skin. This color palette is a filmmaking choice to represent anger and insecurity. As the main character's jealousy grows, the scenes get brighter and harsher, as if the sun itself is punishing him. While Maqbool hid its monsters in the dark, Omkara burns them out in the open. In Omkara, the director uses something called deep focus. This means everything in the frame, from the person right in front of the camera to the mountains far away, is sharp and clear. He does this because in a village, there are no secrets. Everyone is watching you. If you lose your honor, the whole world sees it. The filmmaking tells us that there is nowhere to hide. He also uses objects to represent themes. Instead of a simple handkerchief, he uses that heavy jewel waist belt. The camera treats this object like a character. Every time the belt moves from one person to another, the music gets darker. It's a visual anchor that tells us that the tragedy is moving forward. It's heavy, it's expensive, and it carries the weight of a woman's honor. By making it a physical, clinking object, Bharadwaj makes a betrayal feel tangible. Even the villain, Langda Tyagi, is defined by the camera's gaze. He's often filmed looking at himself in a broken mirror, symbolizing his broken soul and his fractured ego. Bharadwaj uses extreme close-ups of Langda's eyes to show us the gears of malice turning. While the wide shots show us the vastness of the land, these tight shots show us the narrowness of a man's spite. The filmmaking here is also heavily influenced by the Western genre. The way their characters walk, the way they carry their guns, and the standoffish framing of the scenes make the UP Badlands feel like the Wild West. It's a world of hypermasculinity where virility is everything. By using this visual language, Bharadwaj sets the stage for a tragedy where a man's pride is so fragile that a single lie can burn his entire world to the ground. If Maqbool was the suffocating darkness of a room and Omkara was the blinding heat of an open field, then the final chapter of this trilogy takes us to a place where the air itself is a weapon. In 2014, Bharadwaj completed his Shakespearean journey by traveling to the most beautiful and most broken landscape in India. He took Hamlet, a play about a prince who cannot decide whether to live or die, and placed it in a valley that was struggling to do the same. In Haider, the prince becomes a student of poetry. The rotten state of Denmark becomes the conflict-ridden Kashmir of 1995, and the ghost of the father becomes the disappeared doctor. Haider is arguably Bharadwaj's most poetic film. The setting is 1995 Kashmir, and the theme here is the silence of a frozen world. The visual language shifts again, this time to icy blues, slate greys, and stark white snow. In cinema, white often symbolizes peace or purity, but in Haider, the snow symbolizes isolation and erasure. It shows a place where truths are burnt, where bodies are hidden, and where people are forgotten. The camera work here is deeply symbolic. Bharadwaj and his cinematographer Pankaj Kumar often film Haider as a tiny dark dot against a giant, overwhelming white background. This is a deliberate filmmaking choice to show how lonely and helpless he is against the massive, indifferent machinery of the system. The landscape doesn't just surround him, it swallows him. Bharadwaj's use of long takes in Haider is spectacular. There is a fluidity to the camera movement that reflects the protagonist's shifting mental state, his madness. Think of the Bismil song sequence. The camera moves in relentless circles, following the dancers, the giant puppets, and Haider's own frantic movements without cutting away. This lack of editing creates a sense of vertigo. It makes the audience feel the same dizziness and psychological unraveling that Haider is experiencing in that moment. In the iconic graveyard scene, the filmmaking becomes grounded. The camera stays very low to the ground, looking up at the characters as they contemplate life and death. This creates a heavy, somber mood, reminding us that in a conflict zone, death isn't a distant possibility. It is always right underneath your feet. You don't just see the tragedy, you feel the chill of it in your own bones.
ये सारी कौम भी हंसती क्यों रहती है?
क्योंकि मर के ही पता चलता है कि जिंदा थे तो जिए नहीं और मर के भी बचे नहीं.
By the time we reach the end of Haider, the filmmaking has moved from the architecture of guilt and the fire of jealousy to something much more abstract, the silence of the grave. It is the perfect, haunting conclusion to a trilogy that redefined what means to put Shakespeare on screen. This is the true legacy of Vishal Bhardwaj's filmmaking, and his Shakespearean journey is a testament to the power of adaptation. He teaches us that to stay true to the story, you sometimes have to change everything about its surface, which eventually becomes a symphony of sight and sound. Let me know your favorite among the 3 adaptations in the comments below, and if you're interested in watching more, check out our latest video about Rang De Basanti celebrating 20 years right here. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.